You're tuned in to Around the Lens, the internet's only live streaming roundtable discussion podcast, featuring Zach Roberts, Ron Hamilton, Travis Keys, and your host, David J. Murphy. Hello and welcome to Around the Lens, episode 161. I'm your host, David J. Murphy. Joining me as always is my co-host, Zach Roberts. Hello, Zach.
Hello. I am back after a month, 3 weeks. I forget how many shows it's been.
I think 3 weeks. Yeah, 3 shows. I think.
Yeah.
Where are you out to, man?
I was actually crossing the border when to Mexico when you called, I think 3 weeks ago. And then it's just been literally I've either been driving or at a different event or something that I've been covering. Monday for some reason has become like a hot night for things to happen. So yeah.
Wow. Well, Monday is always a hot night for things to happen because we've been doing this show.
True, it is.
3
I know
years.
It's what everybody else is doing.
Heck yeah. If you're not here on Monday night, I don't know what you're doing. Come on. Let's see how many people got watching live right now. 0. All right. Anyways, what you been doing down in Mexico besides getting some cheap tequila?
Actually, I didn't buy. Did I buy anything? I don't think I bought anything. I was basically I'm doing kind of like the early exploration for a documentary that I've been working on for a while about white supremacy in America, and so obviously there's a little thing going on about the border right now. I don't know if y'all heard this. There's some shenanigans about and problems where this guy Donald Trump wants to build more of a border wall, and a lot of people don't want to. So I'm exploring that, and I was down there kind of checking out what it's like. And by the way, Tijuana is super nice. And I walked around for like 2 hours with my cameras out, and no problem. Shock, huh?
Nice. That's good.
I've been told that it's a wild west of murder and despair, and it was fine. They even had a hipster coffee shop where they had these 2 guys that kept seeing me walk around in circles going, come in.
Nice.
You look like the hipster that we want.
And they didn't drug you and put you in some sort of show, so that's great.
No. Everyone was very nice. My cab driver, Zeus, an awesome dude, drove me all around town and was great. So, yeah.
If I had a cab driver named Zeus, I'd tell him my name is Apollo. Just to keep the God thing going. Awesome, man. Well, glad you're back from Mexico, safe and sound. Of course, as you mentioned, it sounds like it's pretty safe down there anyway. So hopefully you got some cool imagery that you shot with your Nikon Z6, right?
Yep, finally got it. If you've been following me on Instagram and on at ZD Roberts and on Facebook, you've probably already seen some the photos and maybe the videos. I think I've posted some videos that I've taken with it, but it is a incredible camera. I'm super hyped about it, and it is it's met almost all of my. It certainly met all my expectations. There's some things that it's actually surpassed, and some things that I'm like, wait, I can't tell whether it's just I haven't figured out how to do it yet before I want to say that. I'm like, I wish this was here. But yeah, there's some really, really cool stuff that like weirdly hasn't been talked about in all the videos. Like you can charge this camera via USB-C, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Considering it's been one of those things of technology that I have no idea why hasn't been a thing for forever. I mean, I'm sure that there's ways that you can do it or whatever, but via USB-C, you can use the thing and it actually charges pretty decently. I just had like a little battery little like phone charger thing, like an Anchor charger. And I mean, it certainly wasn't like a super fast charge, but I think about all the times that I'm like, well, I really wish that I could charge this camera, but I don't have a wall plug anywhere. And, I can just hook it up to my computer now and charge it. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, there are many things modern DSLRs and mirrorless cameras lack that they need to have. And we'll talk about that soon. Because we want to talk about all the fun mirrorless news that's out there. But I do have a question. Obviously, price is a big factor. But was there a specific reason you went with the Z6 over the Z7, or was this basically price?
Well, honestly, it was obviously price, because if I was going to go for the Z7, I probably would have gotten the D850. But the What the specs were, I liked. I needed a Z6 more than I needed a Z7 for what I do.
Right.
Which was interesting, just because the ISO is a little bit better. It's the megapixels are lower, which is something that I want personally. I think our guest might disagree, but I like the lower ones so that I don't have to edit a 100 megapixel image or 100 gig image. And
well, it's what you're doing with the images, right? I mean,
exactly.
That's the thing.
Buy
right?
the camera that you need. Yep.
Well, without further ado, let's introduce our guest for this week, Mr. Liam Sharp. Liam, tell the audience about yourself.
Hi there. So, photographer, live in New York. Recently arrived in New York about 2 years ago. I'm Canadian from Canada, Toronto.
Hey.
And also London, England. So sort of started my career, I guess, in London as an assistant working there, and moved back to Toronto. So I've been a photographer there for many years, and got this incredible opportunity to come here to the States. So I never thought it was possible, but an agent offered me a work permit and now a green card. So I'm here. So it's pretty awesome.
Nice. What kind of drew you to New York, or what drew you to the United States? Was it just the work, or was it adventure, or something else?
I mean, I spent most of my life in Canada, so I mean, it was just an opportunity to be here. To be honest with you, I mean, I never thought I had no idea that I was going to come here. So it was. My wife rented an apartment from her friend for the summer, and so I was here, and I started to go see magazines, and the 3 magazines that I saw, all 3 of them said I should be talking to this agent. So I went to that agent and said, these 3 magazines said I should come and talk to you, and so he took me on and offered me a work permit at that point, or to help me get a work permit. So
right.
I had no idea that it would, but I mean. Obviously, New York is. I mean, I've been working in London quite a bit. I'm English initially, and so I mean, what an incredible opportunity to sort of be able to sort of come to New York as a continuation, so to speak, from where I've been. I mean, it's an incredible place. I mean, it's an incredible place to live, really, and in America is a pretty amazing place to live. So I've never looked back, really. So I'm really happy to be here.
Maybe you already mentioned it, but did you say how long you've been living in the United States?
About 2 years.
2 years. Okay.
2 years. Yeah, 2 years now. So, most of my work, I'm a portrait photographer. My training, I guess, started in London and continued in Canada. And I've been working, I guess, doing corporate work, editorial. Probably most of my interesting editorial work is really coming from the UK. I work a lot for Wired magazine out of the UK, and the Times in London. So I sort of got established there, I guess, in my editorial work. Certainly in Canada, I mean, most of my work was more corporate work, working for hospitals and corporations and that sort of thing. So I really have a kind of a dual, even on my portfolio, my website, I have really kind of a dual kind of approach, in the sense, obviously client work, which is more, reflective of commercial work, working for clients. And then really the personal work is really kind of where I'm coming from. And that's really come more from the influence from working in the UK, I guess, in Europe. So, I'm sort of interested in how I'm actually going to sort of, my work in the States, because obviously it's such a commercial environment. And the sense of where I'm hoping that I'll be able to sort of do more of the kind of creative stuff, but obviously the money really is still in the commercial stuff. So.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, we were talking to a few weeks ago, a guy who does photojournalism in the California. He's shooting a lot of wildfires, but really he does the commercial work to pay the bills, and he does more of the wildfire work just for the fun of it, But yeah, it's definitely the way the reality sometimes. Do you go back up to Canada much, or do you just basically stay in New York?
Yeah, I mean, I still very much have quite a few clients there. So I'm sort of there at least once a month doing work. So I mean, what's great about being in New York is only an hour from Toronto, right? So I have a house there still, and so it's easy for me to go up there an hour's flight to work. And so, in fact, a lot of my clients, I think, in Toronto don't really know that I'm in New York, which is
nice.
But yeah, no, I mean, a lot of my, I guess, where I'm coming from as far as my portrait work is really lighting. I mean, so. I really got that, I guess, really from sort of that British kind of influence as far as approach as far as portrait photography, sort of British Journal of Photography, that kind of a style, right? So more sort of true, humanity and so on and so forth. So I'm trying to bring, it's kind of interesting is whether or not that really has a place here in the US. I mean, there's such a sort of different style and approach from there. So I think I might have to sort of adjust what I do and figure out how I can change my style too.
Speaking of adjusting, can you move slightly to your left? Perfect, right there. Hold that. Okay, great.
Okay.
All right. I'm posing you for my portrait shot. No, it's for the viewfinder good. Here. So let's go ahead and look at some of your work, so we can talk about your work.
Okay.
And you can kind of give us some background on it, and then maybe tell us a little bit about kind of how the two, how sort of how is the market here in America versus Canada? How do those compare? But we'll start let's start with your client work, I guess. That'd be a good place to start.
Okay.
So if you're watching the show, you can see Liam's work. If you're listening to the show, just go to liamsharp.com. But we're looking at your client work as soon as it loads here, whenever that might be. Liam, how did you get started in this business, by the way?
Well, my dad was a photographer. So, I mean, he was... he from the UK, and so we immigrated when I was about 7 years old, but to Canada. But he was a photographer, so I've basically been involved with photography. And I started working as his assistant probably from the age of 14.
Okay.
So by the time I reached 19, high school, he had some of his assistants were sort of the top photographers in London at the time. So I had a real kind of in with kind of the top echelon of photographers. And so I worked with a guy called Brian Duffy in London, and he introduced me to him. He was his assistant. And he, with David Bailey and Terrence Donovan, were part of that instigated the whole swinging 60s Vogue. Brian Duffy did the sort of the Ziggy Stardust photograph of Bowie. I was there a bit after that, but it was, so I had this kind of incredible opportunity really to work with some of the best people. So I worked with another guy called Micah Joseph. I also was offered a job, actually, oddly enough. I was Jay Maisel's assistant in Canada. So when Jay Maisel used to come to Canada, I would actually act as, as his assistant. And so he offered me a job actually in New York at that time. But I had this whole thing about wanting to be legal, and so I arrived in New York and kind of had this carried on and went to London, and so worked there. But so I apprenticed there for about I was an assistant for about 5 years, basically working mostly in London and Toronto.
Cool. Well, I just pulled up your black and white portraits, so if you want to know what I'm talking about. So let's start, because I thought from looking at your homepage, these seem the most striking to me, at least with regard to the way you utilize light to kind of bring out the features of your subjects. So obviously you've got some very striking imagery here. Looks like mostly senior citizens or whatnot. Talk to me a little bit about this series. First off, how did you get this such distinct lighting that just shows off every single little pore and wrinkle? And kind of what were you going for with this portrait series, or how did you start into it, and what was your objective with it?
Well, it's interesting that you choose that as a series. First of all, I'm glad you did, because it's relatively current, and I'm actually going to have 2 shows this year, one in Toronto with that work and one in Montreal, and possibly in London and New York as well. It was for a charity called Sephardic Voices, and basically what Sephardic Voices was basically Sephardic Jews. Sephardic Jews predominantly being pushed completely out of the Middle East, and so they're Jews basically that were living in Iraq, Iran, Egypt, basically in Arab countries, in Arab parts of the world. So as Israel sort of had successes in war and so on and so forth, the persecution increased to the point that these people, the Sephardic Jews were pushed out. The problem with Sephardic Jews, of course, they were Arab Jews, and so when they went to Israel, they were also not considered, they were considered with suspicion and so on. So, there was over 100,000 Sephardic Jews in Iraq, and now there's, I think, 2. So the thing is, these people are now dying out, of course, and so their stories are incredibly important to preserve. And so with the Holocaust, of course, we obviously we know about those stories, but these people were also persecuted. But we don't know about it, right? And certainly, so there's been this real effort. So I was asked by this organization to basically photograph for the purpose of helping to document those stories and having a record, so a portrait, and they were doing video, but they were for exhibition. And so the challenge really was in the beginning of the whole project, as I said to them, I said, do you want pictures that the subjects are going to like? Are going to be happy with, or do you want pictures that basically are going to stand on their own from an exhibition standpoint, that have some kind of artistic integrity? And so my client, brave as he was, said that he wanted, this was for exhibition, and so we've had a big pushback from the people who we photographed. A lot of people, there's people that have, some people have actually pulled their picture and said that they want, they don't want it to be exhibited, and so on and so forth. But the fact is that we did produce a strong series of portraits, which I think is, more important as far as getting the story across. So as far as the lighting is concerned, I believe I have this principle of light that's important to me, and I learned it really from one of my assistants in London, was Nadav Kender's assistant. And so when I worked with him, what was interesting about him is that he was a pro assistant, and so he used to fight me. He wanted to light my pictures, which really bothered me because I'd been lighting for a long time. And so eventually, at one point, I said, "Okay, fine, you light this picture." And he showed me something that's really stuck with me, which is Nadav loves to work with the shadow. Nadav likes to work with kind of work with the shadow as sort of the highlight, and I sort of learned that, and so. The reason why you see all the detail and all the texture is because my highlight, or the main focus of my picture when I'm lighting, is not really the highlight, is working with the shadow. And so what I'm always doing with my lighting is I'm always starting from behind the subject or above the subject, never in front of the subject. And then I'm working the shadow, I'm working my light, and I'm actually kind of shaping the shadow to create, and that's where the texture is, that's where the depth is, that's where the tone is, and that's where, so working on kind of in the dark side, but also, there's much more range in the shadow from a lighting perspective. It's kind of difficult. That's the only issue, because you're working with very subtle ratios to sort of correct, to make that happen. And every subject's different, and so you're kind of doing this on the fly, which is, so I'm pleased with those portraits. And what I would do as well is that I would also, with my subjects, because it's also, a lot of times with photography or with portrait photography, you only have a very small amount of time with the subject. And we want, if I really want to capture the weight and the significance of what we're actually photographing, meaning reflecting what their stories is, it's important to get them into that space, to connect with that. And so I would, Nadav as well would never really talk to his subject. So, but what I would do is try and get them to, I would ask them to go back and think about, a situation, how they escaped, or something that happened to somebody they knew, or whatever it is. And I'd let them sort of focus on that. So they really weren't, focused on me. They were somewhere else. They were connecting to that history. And so that's really the kind of the story about those portraits.
Is there a portrait in this group that you like specifically? I mean, obviously you chose probably the top one is your, portfolio piece, but is there any particular portrait of these that, particularly strikes you or is memorable,
Well, I'd like to get your feedback.
Well,
both of you. I mean, because I'm used to looking at these portraits. I mean, when you look at those, what do you think that works and what doesn't work? I mean, what's your response to those portraits?
I like, you can't see it, but there's this dude who kind of, his face is, it's like kind of, it's wide, got the wide mouth, and kind of got the very expressive eyeballs, with the, the hair is all kind of all over the bushy eyebrows and stuff.
Yeah.
He looks like he's making this very kind of, long expression. I don't know who this guy is, but that's the one that probably for me is the most sticks out, I think.
Right. Well, It's interesting about you saying that. You're actually proving my point by saying that. And that's kind of part of the reason why I asked you this, right? Because essentially the picture what you picked is probably the most ugliest picture. You're picking the subject that actually, and that's really my point. Usually the most interesting, and that's what, as a photographer, I'm always afraid of, as I'm always sometimes afraid of photographing people in that way, because I know that I'm photographing in a way that possibly if they looked at themselves, they would not be happy about this, right?
Yeah.
But then when somebody else outside of that situation looks at those pictures, they're they're pulled towards those kind of images, that have the most character and the most, Do you agree?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, you're definitely gonna spend more time looking at the photos. You're gonna spend more time looking at them. If it was just another poppy, good-looking photo,
Right.
with JCPenney lighting,
Right.
like you're gonna spend a lot more time. Like, I mean, I've looked at these, like, sometimes I think it's number 10, man with you have a gray background and like that image, which I don't think in color would be massively interesting per se. Just like But and just with the lighting, that like there's a little bit of lighting around his eyes and that sort of thing, and it pops and makes him probably he just looks like an average shopkeeper or something, or average person, business owner, like I don't know what, but I definitely want to, it's like I'm spending more time looking at him than I would if it was either in color or just with a flat lighting palette or something.
Right.
Liam, let me ask you something. Your series reminds me of another series of portraits of Jews, but done by another guest of our show, been on a few times, B.A. Van Cise. He did a series called Eyewitness. Have you ever heard of that series?
I have not, but I will certainly check it out.
Oh yeah, go check it out. It's got it's almost along the same lines of black and white portraits of Jews. I think you'd find that again he take a different path towards the lighting and whatnot, but again it's very similar in style. So I'm personally all for any portrait series that highlight, or anything that highlights Jews. I'm a Jew myself, so always good to see that and make sure that that's always remembered. But anyways, I just asked if you know him or knew his work, but check it out. I'll put a link in the show notes.
Right. Okay. I mean, it's interesting you mentioned that, because that was something too, because I'm not Jewish, and so I thought that was, it was something where I was photographing in synagogues, and I was, and it was interesting that they asked me to be the person that the photographer to capture that. I find that I was an honor, really. But I mean, part of my sort of ethos, I guess, as far as portrait photography, certainly my personal work is that I believe there's so many people photographing things that are beautiful in the positive end of the spectrum, right? I mean, commercially, everybody's drawn towards things that are, and I believe that humanity, there's so much of a wider spectrum. I mean, you as a photographer, you're obviously drawn to the same thing in your work too, right? So, so very much so. So I think there's a lot more, as in the shadow, as in the dark side. I also think as in humanity, in all the things that we sort of pull away from. You talked about photographing, being in that situation where that great shot that you were talked about, and how you weren't pulling
in Charlottesville,
away. Right. So.
No, I've very little interest as well in photographing things nicely. I still always say, like, I still joke, I actually have never taken a nude portrait or done any of the things like kind of the standard freshman college, like sort of thing, just because it was like, no, everybody, that seems like, hitting the ball off of a tee as opposed to, actually hitting a pitch.
Right.
It's very easy to work it. Yeah, a fastball. Yeah.
Right.
Somebody's under arrest. Is that you? Is they coming for you, Liam?
What's that?
Are they coming for you?
He's out there, but he's gonna go right by.
That's New York City for you.
That's New York City. I know. I just think there's so much more to explore, really. There's too many photographers, too much commercially going in that direction. The only problem is when I talk about commercially, Obviously the work that I'm doing with the way I love shooting portraits or lighting portraits and lighting them with hard light and showing every detail and all those sorts of things is not that commercial. I mean, it's going in the opposite direction of what I should be going commercially, right? But at the same time, I think what I think there might be space, more space in the photographic market for possibly what I'm doing. I hope so, anyways. That. Because certainly there's enough people doing that other stuff, right? So, to be honest with you, that's the thing that I find that's quite interesting about the U.S. market or the U.S. kind of approach or style, generally about photography, portrait photography, generally comparatively to a European style. And some people have sort of criticized me, saying, "Well, your work is too European. Your work is, And I think that's, I think in Europe, sure I'm British, but I spent most of my life in Canada, but I think there really is a sort of a sense of being drawn towards things that are real, that are honest, that are true, that are, and I'm not to say that what's happening in America is not that, but I'm just finding that, that's what I'm pulled towards. And I think there's a lot of, certainly in Europe, when you go through the British Journal of Photography and so on and so forth, there's certainly more examples of that than there. I don't know. What do you guys think? What do you think? You guys are, what do you think? What do you think about from a stylistic standpoint? Do you think I'm what I'm saying is right, or do you think what's your response to that?
Art is subjective, right? So I don't think there's a right or a wrong.
Absolutely.
It's just what makes you money or makes you happy, right? Or both, hopefully.
Well, that's what I'm talking about. What makes you money? That's what I'm talking about. What makes you money is something else, right? So.
Well, again, what makes you money is also at the whims of what taste is within. You look at like what is popular nowadays with millennials and popular with things. It's like they want stuff that's more stark in reality, whereas what was popular 50 years ago was stuff that was more, I guess, controlled and done up. Like look at like fashion magazines or look at beauty things. There's a lot more of a trend now to not photoshopping portraits and beauty stuff, because it's been creating such a unrealistic image of women over the last 50 to 100 years. Who knows? Well, they didn't have Photoshop 100 years ago, but again, that idea. So
different ways,
right? Darkroom techniques, right?
Yeah.
So I it's subjective, and it's going to be based on the taste, especially when you're working for like a corporate client. I think what doesn't change, or what will change based on your own skill sets and personal taste, is your own work and sort of what you desire.
It's interesting because I don't know what forum or whatever it was on, because I'm not on any wedding forums, but obviously there's been this long move within wedding and even like event photography to photojournalism style, like photojournalistic style, and I'm putting air quotes up because it's just basically making things look impromptu for the most most part. It's not actually shooting in a photojournalistic style. But I did read, maybe it was in PDN, but a discussion about it taking that to the next step and starting to go and limiting the amount of photo editing that one does on like wedding photos. And actually not like, taking out the mole or the pimple or something like that, and just making it a little bit more realistic and almost, I guess maybe they're moving towards like a snapshot kind of look. But as opposed to, because it's, the less, the faked reality is the big thing for the most part. Like if you look at, the larger Instagram accounts, all of them are like faked reality, faked, where it's like, oh, I didn't see my friend taking this photo of me, but it turned out excellent. And you can tell it's Photoshopped to hell and, and everything. And, and I'm curious, I'm wondering, like, I'm betting that's the next step within a lot of higher end, like wedding photography, is just like making it more Instagram friendly, making it more, the faked reality. Even more so than in a different way than it was before, where everything's set up and whatever, but and doing it in a photojournalism style. And it'll be interesting though if we ever actually get to the point where we can actually allow non, I don't want to say ugly photos, but the actual reality, because like I that's one of the tough things. The few weddings I've shot, I think about, there's photos that I absolutely love, and I think that they're like the best photos of the wedding, but the bride or whoever wouldn't like, I could tell that they wouldn't like them because it just,
Right.
The smile is like crooked or something, and just whatever's there. And,
Right.
and I'm just like, the photojournalist in me is like screaming because I'm like, that's the shot. Like, that's the shot you'd run at the top of the thing because it's the best shot. But like,
Right.
obviously, since everybody has to look good in the right moment, and everyone's eyes have to be open and everything like that. That's honestly one of the biggest really irritates me about event photography and in corporate work.
Well, it's like I took photographs during my wife's pregnancy, and I thought I got some really strong, dramatic imagery of her, obviously throughout the whole process. And, I got some great shots that are like, not flattering, but they are like, they show, the exhaustion and the pain and suffering that goes into birth. But she was like, and I was like, hey, look at how great these shots are. And she's like, no, none of them. Don't put any of them online. No, absolutely not. Just this one shot after I give him birth where I'm holding the baby, and this other shot where I'm smiling. That's it. That's all it's going to represent my pregnancy. I'm like, oh, but honey.
Yeah,
I even made them black and white, and she didn't buy it. Nope, she wasn't into it.
Not everything needs to be documented. This is what, as a photojournalist, this move towards birth photography. I'm good.
Well, she's okay with them being in our personal collection. She just doesn't want them out there,
But I'm just saying, like, there's a big move. It's a new job field to actually have a professional photographer in the delivery room.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I don't know.
Because people want that photojournalistic sense. Well, let's look at your personal work really quick, Liam. I'm going to pull up your African portraits, if you don't mind.
Yeah,
and
sure.
We can talk about those really briefly. So kind of give us the background on these photos here. I'm just scrolling through them really quickly. They're very kind of like powerful portraits against a completely, I'm going to say, high-key white background. And they just kind of show off sort of the different flavors of Africa, to include some topless ladies. But go ahead and talk to me about how this sort of series came about and, the inspiration for it and how you shot these.
Yeah, I mean those were shot. I mean, that's why I was happy that you picked that other series, because those were shot quite a few years ago now. So, but what happened there, which is kind of interesting, is that I was when we talk about kind of reflecting it back to the client and the market and so on and so forth, I was up for there was a job that was, as so many jobs at that time were on white background, and I didn't put in my portfolio that I dropped off to. They didn't have any white background shots. And, I thought, well, but, I mean, anybody can shoot on a white background. Do I really need to show this? And so what happened is I didn't get the job, and I phoned up the art director, and he said, well, you didn't have any white background shots. How do we know that you know how to photograph on a white background? So I said, well, you know what? I'm going to show you that I know how to photograph on a white background. I'm going to do the most difficult white background shots ever. I'm going to go to a war zone. I'm going to photograph in a white background situation. So what I did is I went to Ethiopia, and I went to southern Ethiopia, to the Omo Valley, and it was at a time really where, since then they've actually literally put a highway in down to this area, so it's incredible how things change so quickly. But it took 7 days to drive down there, and I brought a bed sheet, and I only had, at that time I was using just two Norman 200B lights, right? So this will kind of date it when it was, right? And what I did is I clipped on the top of the 4x4. There was where all the gas cans were for the 7-day drive. I clipped on a bed sheet and basically positioned the truck at a time of day where the sun was my third source. So my sun was basically the kind of the fill light, and then I had two Norman lights very, very close from above to kind of create that kind of drama. And then in post, literally just took out all the creases and all the shadows and all the rest of it. But I mean, that's what I love about love about going to places and photographing things that are really real, and then basically applying kind of a language, a light, or a kind of a photographic language, so that we think that they're shot in New York, or we think that they're shot here, when really, the way I've approached it is they're not. They're shot in literally an African village. I mean, the one guy that I don't know what shot is, he got this hair bun, and it was sort of an honor because he was in battle. He had killed somebody from the opposing tribe the day before, So, anyways, so it's so that's how that series, and that was kind of my first trip to Africa, I guess, and I was afraid, actually, and I was rightly afraid, because the guide that I was working with, when we were in the desert, decided to wanted to drive off, would leave me in the desert, basically, and he wanted to know what else he could get from me that wasn't in the car, that he already had access to before he drove off and left me in the desert. So, I mean, that's kind of Africa for you. And and I basically told him that I could get him a place on the internet, and I would find him. I would register a domain, and therefore, people like myself could find him versus going through a middleman. And he let me back in the car, So nice. So the $10 registration fee that I paid was for that domain, So that's kind of Africa. But
wait, so he was gonna steal your stuff and let you die in the desert? That's right. If you didn't register a domain for him. Wow.
Well, no, he didn't know about the domain. I just, I had a sense. He just wanted to talk about his tip the whole time. And then basically, and I kept on saying, well, look, we do the tip at the end, It's like, don't worry, I'll take care of you, right? Yeah. And so he wanted to make sure that so I had, he took me to this desert on the way driving back to Addis at the time, and said, look, we should go to this desert. So we did, and I walked up this dune, and then I came back, and he'd locked the door and basically said, okay, I'm driving off, and you're going to die here, and you have to tell me why I should let you back in this car. And so I had to kind of come up with something to come up with at the last minute or on the spot. And I came up with, that, okay, well, what I can do for you is I can get you on the internet. That's what I can do for you.
Wow. Was that scary? Were you scared at all?
Yeah, well, at the time, of course, but the problem was driving back with this guy back to Addis after the situation, right? Yeah. That was more kind of a bit of a trip, right? So anyway,
I would have gotten. Anyways. I wonder what you got his domain as. I would have gotten like his name sucks.com. Be like, there you go, buddy. There's your domain.
That's right. Well, the odd thing is once his domain name expired, a year later, he phones me up in Canada and wants me to renew his domain.
You're like, no, F you. Yeah. Go to hell.
Well, I went back to Ethiopia after that, and I was actually afraid that I would bump into this guy. But anyways, but Africa's like, I mean, that's the problem with traveling to different parts of the world, things can happen like that, and life can be kind of cheap that way, right? So, but
tough.
So anyway, so I came back. There was even in some of those pictures. I photographed poachers. We came across poachers, and my guide, this guy, told me he understood the language. He told me, look, we have to. I said, anytime you hear something that we have to go, you let me know. And so he said, okay, we have to go. And it turns out that the poachers had gone into a firefight with the Rangers 2 days before, had killed one of the Rangers. And so he found this out. So we took off, and about a mile down the road, there was this truckload of soldiers or other Rangers they were coming to look for these guys in force. And so I can just imagine how it would have been if we were still photographing, while these guys showed up, right? So it's anyway. So I've just kind of come back how ridiculous that was. That I just wanted to prove to this art director, that I could do this shoot on a white background. At the end of the day.
And he probably turned around and said, not really my style. Go back and do it some more. Get a few more shots. Good try.
I still didn't get any. I didn't get any work from them anyway.
Oh.
So yeah.
But at least now you have proof you can shoot on a white backdrop. So that's all that matters.
That's right. No,
I love it. I like this series. Although me personally, I'd probably have a hard time photographing poachers because I find what they do morally reprehensible. Right. But hey. you still got an excellent series out of this. I think the most striking image here that I'm looking at is the one with the guy with the plate in his mouth and the headdress. I think was that the one you were talking about, the one that got awarded, or is that another?
This guy has sort of this, is a profile, and he's got this sort of bun on his head. He's kind of a tall, slender guy.
Yeah, okay.
I think it's the second image. Yeah,
yeah.
The plaid or
that's right.
Yeah, no, it's not plaid. It's tartan. Yeah, there you go.
Tartan. Yeah. That's the guy. That's the guy.
Cool. Any particular image from this series that you most like?
I don't know if it's the first image, because I'm not looking at the site right now. But
it's the one with the person
with
the
guy
gun.
kind of cradling the gun. I like that one because he's the guy sort of effeminate in a way, and so he's probably somebody that's kind of forced into this lifestyle or into things are so laid out for men and women in those types of societies or tribes, so I think there's sort of would be more to his life or his story if he wasn't in that situation, but I think that sort of apprehension that comes through in his eyes and so on and so forth, I think is interesting.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned shooting on, you said this backdrop was a sheet, like a bed sheet?
Yeah.
So you mentioned you shot this on a bed sheet using, again, the sun as your third light. So let's go jumping to the backdrop discussion. There was this article on Petapixel talking about the benefits. No, that's okay. The difference between shooting on like a cheap backdrop versus an expensive backdrop. And I thought, hey, this might be something a portrait photographer might have some thoughts on. So this guy shot, on a $10 cheap seamless backdrop for his portraits, and I think came out with some pretty decent portraits out of it. But what are your thoughts on this? I mean, do you think does it matter if you're getting an expensive backdrop or a cheap backdrop? I mean, you've worked with probably all the different high end backdrops or low end backdrops. So what's your thoughts on this?
I love shooting. I mean, I did part of what some of the series that are there. There's something I shot recently is in the portraits of humanity portraits, and that are a series there. And I photographed on sort of kind of a concrete walls, in Havana. And so, I think the backdrops are, the canvas, the cotton or the cloth or whatever it is. Obviously, you're trying to create. Either an environment. I think sometimes the most interesting, I've seen more shots recently where people have taken sort of things that are not backdrops, cardboard or corrugated metal or, sort of things like that I think are sort of more interesting because they're sort of backdrops, but they're also kind of connecting to an environment or they give you sort of more of a texture, more of a flavor, I think that I think the problem is canned backdrops, so to speak, are limited, in my opinion, right? And I think creatively we can the only issue is that when you're shooting on in a studio, and that's really why I like going on location. And recently I was in Havana, and there was I was dragging my case of 5 lights on the street, to literally my studio, right? And so. Obviously, it's easier to do that in a studio kind of situation, and therefore it's limited to bring what you can bring, right? So, I don't know. I mean, I either like real clean or dark, or I think sometimes I don't think the background should really either you go for the background. The background is the kind of big part of the image, or the person is a big part of the image, and so I think you have to kind of get that balance, one or the other, right? So, but I don't know if that answers your question. But.
Do you prefer the street portraits or the studio portraits? Do you have a preference?
Well, all my portraits are on location pretty well. So even if they look like they're in the studio, they're always on location. And so
let me rephrase that. Do you want like the controlled in studio style setting, or do you want like the on the street, like you said, shooting with whatever is around type setting? What do you have a preference? I'm talking about like shooting with like a bunch of lights in a controlled thing and a tripod and backdrop holder and everything, or like you're out and about and you're just kind of creating backdrops with whatever you see.
Well, I mean, what I'm saying is the approach that I take is always the same, whether or not I'm in the studio or on the street. And so it doesn't, it's really, to me, it's about the light, and it's about controlling the light, whether or not I'm on the street or wherever I am, right? So it's about, for me, about portrait, it's about the light is still a major component to what I'm doing. So I will always bring 4 or 5 lights, and I will always go to that kind of extent to have that control. So it doesn't really make the difference whether I'm in the studio in that kind of a controlled environment versus if I'm on the street or backstage or wherever it is. I mean, I love the street, or I love those opportunities where I'm photographing things that are really real. I remember I did a series of drag queens where I photographed backstage, and I set up just as they came off, and photographed literally as they came off from their performance. And you get something that's really unique and real, but I lit them as if I were shooting them in the studio. Yeah. And so that I was able to basically combine those two, which is, I think, what I'm interested in, is being able to make them look like they're studio portraits, but they're in these different environments where people can be real and connect to what's going on around them. So it's more of a real portrait versus taking them out of their context. I rather photograph them in their context, but then bring the studio to them. That's sort of my approach. But I don't know if that answers your question. But
well, let's ask this then. What do you think about naturally lit portraits? Do you ever do any naturally lit stuff? Like no lights, just whatever is in the environment?
I'm not getting you anymore, but let me just try.
I think we have to do a switch.
Let's vamp for time. Hey, William King, welcome to the show. I see you're a friend of Liam's. If you have any questions, let us know. Zach, you ever do anything with the studio lights?
What's that?
You ever do anything with studio lights? I know you're the portrait, you're the protest guy, but I mean,
I literally don't even know how to anymore. I took one, literally not one class as in like a semester long, but one class on portrait work. Did the photos that I had to take for it. They were okay, not amazing, and then never really did it again. I in fact, usually the only time I've done portraits, I have a handheld LED light that I'll use, and I'll just literally move around in real time to take the photo while I have the camera in the other hand, and that's it. Yeah. So yeah, no, that's one of the many reasons why I've been loving that as cameras have gotten better and better with ISO, is the fact that I've been able to just cheat. Yeah. without you can make a scene look good.
Yeah.
Oh, better, not good, but better.
Gooder. I prefer gooder.
Yeah, gooder. Yeah, there you
go. Yeah, my portrait experience, or my flash experience, included about a week or so when I was initially learning photography, and then some work I did on my own, just kind of learning flash, and then of course all the time I got to spend in the studio in Syracuse. You know about the studio in Syracuse, right? Yeah. So that wonderful checkerboard studio, large, huge, high ceiling studio. Loved working in there, and that's where I did most of the kind of creative work with flash. So but beyond that, I do have the studio in my house. You may have seen sort of the lights in the background. I've got a backdrop right there, but primarily just using it to take portraits of my kids. That's about it for right now. I actually need to get a new backdrop. I've been just shooting with this blue-gray backdrop for the last I don't know, forever, but maybe I should just invest in lights and not worry about backdrops, right, Liam? Just get some great lights.
Well, I don't know. It's just, that's just where I'm coming from. But I think we all go down our own paths. We all have our own things that we're focused on, right?
Yeah.
That's how we get good at what we do, right?
Have you thought to move to LED in any way, shape, and form? Because I'm seeing more. The idea for me of not being a person who've ever been able to figure out the whole even though having Nikon, which has always been a little bit easier with using off-camera flashes and lighting and stuff like that, and never being able to figure out the pro photo whatevers, the idea now that I can light a scene with LED lights that aren't going to burn out anyone's retinas and aren't going to make the room 5,000 degrees being constantly on old school movie lights might. That just seems absolutely amazing to me. If I had, yeah.
Well, the thing for me is that the flash, because of the whole idea of being able to control ambient, right? Meaning to control the amount of ambient as part of the equation in the light, in the combination of the light, or the ratio in the light. Obviously, LEDs are constant, and so to do that, you'd have to make them either really powerful, you have to adjust them, or up and down, right? But from an outside standpoint, like kind of what we're talking about, you kind of need the flash to do that.
Outside,
or even in the studio too. But I mean, the other thing is LEDs. I don't think you get the same. Well, I don't know. I mean, I haven't really worked with them, but I mean, there's something about the specular aspect of flash and the sharpness of flash, and the hardness of the light, and the kind of light shaping that's available with flash, I think. And I think it's it's oddly enough, the way I learned lighting was, I remember when I was learning lighting, it was you kind of light in a dark room in your head, so you imagine everything to be black, and so you just kind of get used to knowing what the light sources do, and then being able to sort of kind of light that way, you know what I mean, without really seeing what you're doing, right? So I've always kind of worked in the dark, or blindly, so to speak. So you kind of get used to doing that, I guess. But so maybe being able to see it would be a problem for me.
No, I see. My problem is I've learned. I started. I kind of went backwards where most people are going. I started in film and video, and then moved to still. So the idea that I can't already see it and fix it live drives me nuts. So,
well, the thing is that when we talk about all this lighting, we talk about being hung up on that within the context of in a fluid environment, or a situation, or a portrait, or whatever it is. The thing that drives me nuts is that how it kind of controls. It's too controlling. I think it's liberating to kind of take the approach of being able to photograph things more fluidly. And if if you had a light source, or you weren't using lighting, I think that you're actually able to capture something kind of, different, but really good too, right? And you're not sort of tied by, in a way, I sort of kind of question why I've gone down this path, because because I think there's so much more that maybe I'm missing, by taking that approach, by sort of setting all this stuff up and all the rest of it, So it's interesting, because when you look at the portraits on my website, there's two series of portraits that from the recent trip to Cuba. One is what I call Portraits of Humanity, and the other ones are sort of the tied-in faces. And what happened there was, after a week of shooting with 4 or 5 lights on the street, I decided to go out with just one light source. And the reason for that is I wanted to move more quickly and more fluidly, and I wanted to only shoot 2 or 3 frames of the subject before they actually got kind of focused on the fact that I was really kind of shooting their portrait. And so I would basically, if you look at those, even though there's way less light and there's way less setup, I think in a way I was able to capture much more kind of real and authentic portraiture, because the light wasn't that much of the equation. So if you know what I'm saying. So it's, anyways, I just think this whole process is, as we go forward, and how we go, how we shoot, and how we do things, and how we sort of, the gear, and how the approach and the style can actually be quite restricting.
Well, let me ask this, Liam. Talking about, let's move on from the gear and lighting and stuff, because I wanted to ask you about another subject that, again, I chose these subjects so that I knew I was going to have somebody focused on portrait work. And I saw this article, another article from our favorite website, right, Zach, Petapixel, basically talking about the prices of work and putting prices online. And I'm all for like price transparency. I just when I'm trying to like find a photographer or whatever, like just tell me how much you charge. Like I get it. It's like everyone wants to keep it secret, because if you show what you charge, then people can cut you and stuff like that. But I'm all about price transparency. I'm about putting out there how much you make. We would all be better off if we all knew how much we all made, because it would, get us a better picture idea of what the market is paying for people. But, I'm looking at your website. I don't see any way to know what you charge for work. So obviously you prescribe, at least unless I'm missing it somewhere, you prescribe to sort of the idea of not publishing your prices. But again, this article here talks about why they publish their prices, and I just want to know, like, what are your thoughts on the subject? Why do you not post your price on your website? Do you think you would consider it? If not, why not?
Well, I mean, I think there are completely different markets. And certainly I work in different markets. So, I mean, and we, even within the markets, there are different kind of categories or levels within those markets, right? So even in the corporate market, I mean, if you're working for a high-end design firm, they've already educated the client of what the costs are, and sort of they are sort of the filter in understanding what the market is, and so we're all on the same page. The issue is educating the client. And so the problem is how do we educate the client to understand the value of what we do, right? And so the problem I'm finding with, especially if you're sort of headshots or sort of at that kind of level, you're dealing with clients. So some clients, obviously, that might be at a big law firm that have hired photographers before, understand that. But then if somebody's sort of searching you like that on the internet, maybe they have no idea. And so for to say that you're going to charge $400 or $500 or $1,000 to show up, and then it's going to be so much per image after that, or whatever it is, or there's a day rate, they just have no understanding. Why would you charge $2,000 a day, or why would you charge this kind of money, right?
And they'll be like, "What? I don't own the photos."
Yeah, all that stuff, right?
I can't just have all the raws and do whatever I want with them. No, you see, I own the copyright.
Well, this is it, and so I think that because it's only because it might be that you might want that job, because they're photographing 30 people and it's going to be 3 or 4 days, and and maybe it's okay, but I just think that, to be honest with you, I guess I'm not a consumer-based photographer. I don't deal with the general kind of public or the people that might Google search me. I guess I work more with clients that understand the market and understand the value, and that's why they might come to me or go to somebody else. So I really don't see the need to kind of because then I'm in that game of I got to compete with so and so and so and so, and so I guess I just don't want to compete on that level. I guess that's really I'd rather. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I know what I charge, and I know, a client asks me for, but it's also dependent on so many other variables. And so I want to be able to quote the job the way based on those variables, usage and, the timing and how much it takes and so on and so forth. And what, whether or not there's other things that are part of the picture, whether I need makeup artists or assistants or backgrounds or whatever that is. Right. So, and so it just gives me that opportunity. Otherwise, if I say it's only this set amount, it's very difficult to sort of, kind of add from there. You said that it was going to be this much. It's on your website, and now it's double that. Why?
Right.
That kind of thing.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
doesn't allow you the flexibility to build in those factors that your client may not be thinking about.
Yeah,
that's right. So what I would look at the client, and I would look at where they're coming from and the kind of sector and the kind of experience they might have, and then know roughly where I should kind of start as far as my pricing, and know how, and I can be flexible on the way I quote and the way I explain why I'm doing, why I'm charging what I'm charging. So
yeah.
Move your hair to your left again. Hair to your perfect, right there. Hold that. Okay. So let's talk about then how you price out a client, just for just so we understand. So a client contacts you and says, "Hey, Liam, saw your work on healthcare. I want that for my hospital. I want all my medical doctors to get really nice portrait shots and stuff like that. I got 50 doctors, and I want them all to have a beautiful shot, each individual shot in a different location in the hospital, and I want it beautifully lit like you did that one guy, and you can do that right for $50, right? Yeah, you can do that for $50." My daughter has a camera. I just got her a camera for Christmas. Yeah, she says she can do it for me for $50. So you can do it for $50, right? Educate me as the client. How do you educate the client, and make them, understand the value of, or do you not bother with educating the client? You only work with clients who understand the value of work.
You think part of the problem with coming from a different marketplace is that we have a different. I need to learn what this marketplace and how this marketplace works, in the sense, and I, so I'm sort of coming from Canadian perspective or British perspective, and essentially from the Canadian perspective, what we would do is
first start out with saying I'm sorry, and then you say, "Listen, I have to charge you the actual price."
Yeah, well, I quote based on my time. So if there's going to be a day rate, and then basically I figure out what I can do within that day reasonably. So if it's all on one background and I can shoot one every 15 minutes, and then I know it's 4 an hour, and I can sort of then build in the time for break and an 8-hour day and setup time and all the rest of it, and then kind of build the price around my day rate. Right. And then usage on top of that. So depending on that's if depending on the usage, beyond a certain type of usage, then obviously there'd be a usage fee. But
how do you determine the price for usage? Is there a calculator you use, or are you just sort of based on experience, or?
To be honest, if it gets into usage, then we're not really talking about corporate anymore. We're talking about advertising, and so the agency really, I think, has a pretty good idea. The art buyer, the producer, has a good idea of where that should land. And if they want to work with you, they kind of want everybody to be in the ballpark, in the same ballpark. So you kind of get guidance from them in that respect. Because otherwise you're just picking numbers, and I think. They want to present to their client a kind of everybody within the same kind of range, So I usually get guidance from them. I don't know if that answers your question.
And then it's kind of down to like rights usage and like how long can they use the stuff, and then coming out terms and stuff, because of course everybody wants like unlimited forever rights to your pictures, and you'd be like, no, I'll give you like a year-long thing, or if you want to own my imagery outright, it's going to cost you 10 times as much, right?
Right.
Or do you not make those kind of deals? Do you own everything, or do you sell the rights to your stuff?
I sell the rights, to be honest with you, only because I'm coming from a different market and their expectations. And the fact is that the problem with Canada is that we haven't had copyright laws that protect photographers. It's only recently that photographers. Wow. Yeah.
So I mean, does that mean that like I can steal your work if you did it in Canada, or I guess now I can't because of the laws? Okay.
Actually, it was my dad that started an organization. He joined ASMP and learned about copyright and the contracts and how it was done down here. And so he went back to Canada and started an organization like ASMP called AtL. Wow. And unfortunately, he died before he got it. They got it through Parliament, but. I don't know if it's 10 years ago, maybe 7 or 8 years ago.
Yeah,
but
it wasn't
before
that long ago.
It wasn't that long ago. Photographers are considered technicians, and so they were just people that pushed the button. But essentially, the client owned all the copyright unless you negotiated otherwise, and that's why my dad wanted to introduce a contract like they had in the States. So. Because now, of course, it's flipped the other way because the law's gone through. Now the client's, starting position is, well, it's up to them to negotiate with the photographer the rights, versus if they don't, then the photographer owns all copyright. So then it become a hostile thing where they sort of say, well, we own all the copy. That's their starting position, right? So it's, but obviously in the States it's different. So it's been dealing with copyright for a lot longer, and photographers. Protected for a lot longer, right? So it's
so like for instance, before this law, if I was in Canada and I took photographs and I published them online, did that mean anybody could take them and use them however they wanted? I had no copyright, or I had no claim to my own work. You would own the
copyright if you took your own picture. I'm talking about client work.
Okay.
So if you shot your own images, then yes, you would own the copyright. They wouldn't be up to 50 years. So the time limit was 50 years, basically, after the creation. But we're talking about client work.
So you had no choice in terms of client work. You had to give your imagery rights unless you can negotiate out.
You had to negotiate. It was up to the photographer to negotiate, and now it's up to the client to negotiate. So the default position now is the photographer owns all copyright. Yeah. Before the default position is the client owned all copyright unless otherwise negotiated. Right. So
nice.
So in advertising, of course, agencies were, they understood that, and so the usage was always negotiated. But in other, editorially, of course, the rates were so low that copyright, usually you own the copyright. It was just really the corporate sector where that was, became an issue.
But you sell the rights to all your work, or at least the work you do for clients, or that's the majority you do. That's primarily what you do.
I own the copyright for all the editorial work that I've done, and certainly the advertising work that negotiate copyright. It's just that if I'm doing a series of headshots or photographing in somebody's factory or their facilities or whatever it is, there's limited use that I can, because I don't have property releases, I don't have model releases.
Right.
So it was not really an issue for me, because ultimately I couldn't put those images into stock or do anything with them anyway.
Right.
So I wouldn't make an issue. I would try and get an additional $1,000 or something, but it just became a negotiation aspect, really. to get the job or whatever it is. So if it really became a massive issue and I wanted to do the job, then it's not like I was going to use those pictures.
Yeah.
Anyways. So.
Well, let me ask you, what do you shoot with? What's your camera of choice?
I shoot with the Canon 5D Mark IV. I used to, forever shoot with Hasselblad, and then I had a Hasselblad phase and Hasselblad system, and the cameras today are so good. The problem is I found that the clients were willing to pay for the medium format, to be able to sort of continue upgrading and so on and so forth, and they didn't really see the difference, right?
Yeah.
Also, it's so much easier nowadays to shoot with DSLRs, and now obviously mirrorless is coming online, that it's just so much easier to shoot that way. So
yeah.
Well, when the imagery is just going to show up on a website in a cropped little 640 by 480 box or whatever, it's like it's tough to justify the medium format or whatever. Although you want the 100 megapixel camera, and we'll probably have the 100 megapixel mirrorless soon.
I want the 100 megapixel camera because I want to be able to, for fine art, I want to be able to blow those African pictures. They were shot. I think those shots were like I don't know, they were 30 megabytes when they were, and I blew them up full size.
Yeah.
But if I, obviously if I had 100 megapixel,
check out Liam's new portrait series, which will be on the side of buildings here once he soon gets that 100 megapixel camera. Awesome. Well, we were talking about mirrorless before the show started, and primarily because, Zach, of course, has a mirrorless camera. I've been using a mirrorless camera before it was cool, Zach, FYI. And Liam, you might move to mirrorless in the future here. Are you considering it? Well, Canon actually, not released, but somehow leaked the EOS RP. So in case you didn't know, last year Canon released the EOS R, which was their first flagship mirrorless camera. And of course, it was met with mostly mez. Kind of like, again, I think they did a good job with the camera, but again, Canon does not seem to understand what people want with regard to 4K video. So, many of us who shoot video kind of just ignored it. But I am a little bit more intrigued by the Canon EOS RP, if nothing else, because I think it potentially, based on the leaked specs, is going to be a cheaper, lower entry level mirrorless large form full frame censored camera, and I think that's pretty neat because I've been looking at the S1R potentially as an upgrade path into the full frame mirrorless market, but it's pretty expensive, and so I think a cheaper lower end mirrorless camera that's full frame is gonna kind of do what Canon and Nikon have to do, which is migrate to full frame mirrorless as their sort of main bread and butter. I mean, the days of mirrored cameras and single lens reflex, cut cameras are getting to the end, and I think Canon sees the writing on the wall with this camera. What do you think, Liam? Is this as a Canon shooter yourself, is this perhaps, is the EOS R or perhaps even this RP, something that intrigues you?
Well, I guess what intrigues me really is the focus.
Mm-hmm.
I think this, on sensor focus. I mean, I've heard things about the Sony I've seen demos that are just incredible. So
yeah,
that's always been an issue that I've had, is nailing the focus. And I think from that perspective, it would be, to be honest with you, I haven't really, I don't know much about them. Obviously I'm a Canon shooter, and so it's only relatively recent, and what turned me off, of course, is all the gloss I have, with the new system. So,
with the Canon, obviously you can get that adapter that they make, and you can use all your glass. So you don't have to get rid of your glass, unless you want to jump to their new RF glass or whatever they call it. Right.
I mean, again, the problem with rumors and the problem with, what's coming next and all the rest of it, right? So, I just sort of think having a higher megapixel camera would be awesome for the kinds of fine art stuff that I want to do anyway. So
yeah.
So mirrorless or not mirrored, you don't care. You want them megapixels.
Well, yeah. I mean, tell me what the benefit of mirrorless is. I mean, you were telling me earlier about the viewfinder and some of the stuff, but I mean.
I don't personally. I don't see. It's almost weird because I've been talking about how Nikon didn't didn't really sell their mirrorless camera to photojournalists. In fact, there's no last time I checked, there's no photojournalists on there. Like, they get them early and they get to try them out and everything like that. I mean, there's some handful of like people who do editorial work, but not photojournalism, and not like out in protests or out in, doing daily news and stuff like that. And the capabilities that this camera has, the fact that it's quieter than my DSLRs by at least 75%. Each shutter, like here, I can. I don't. That's right up next to the microphone. That's the shutter just bursting on normal, and then obviously, if it's on the video mode, I can actually take stills from the 4K from that image, and it's absolutely silent. There's no noise whatsoever, and that is my understanding is that Donald Trump just had a couple weeks ago, had his talk in the Oval Office. I forget which room it was in. And there were photos taken while he was giving his speech. And my understanding is that everyone was basically shooting mirrorless at this point. And so they can shoot while he's talking, which is like just little things like that you don't realize that like beforehand, like whether it be movie sets, like I do some entertainment work, and I would have to wait. If I was going to take a photo on a set, I'd have to wait until after they're shooting and hope that I can catch a moment. But now, next time I go on a set, I can literally put it on the video mode and take frames as it's going, no noise whatsoever, and that's literally, I now get to take photos that I previously was not able to take. That's a game changer on cameras that I've never had, other than maybe ISO and things like that. Like, now even with like back in the days with the D70, that camera had ISO capabilities that, I'd have to shoot with a, I don't know what level, what ISO 800, color film, which never looked good, or didn't look amazing at least. And so this has been at least within Nikon, this has been one of the biggest game changers for that. And never mind the fact that it shoots, 4K video, which is fantastic. And the low light on it's incredible. I don't know. And for me, it also comes down to, especially with the Nikon, and my understanding is the Canons are relatively in the same ballpark, is the price range for what the camera is. It had the Z6 has many of the capabilities of the D850 or even like the D5 or the D4, and it is $1,500 cheaper. So that's a camera that I usually have to wait for almost all of my cameras. I have to wait until I get a used copy from a buddy of mine, and that's how I get the new camera or whatever. The only reason I have a Nikon D750 new in quotes from Nikon was because they ran a ridiculous sale on the camera where it was like $700 off or something like that. I don't know why they were doing it, but they did. And so basically being like now the entry level full frame 4K video and all these things with low light has similar sensor to the top of the line DSLRs that are out there, is basically the price of what the D750 was when it came out, or the D. I mean, it's actually a mass. It's like $1,000 cheaper, I think, than when the D700, the first Nikon's first full frame digital camera came out, and obviously that was 12, 15 years ago or whatever. So the price difference on it, and whether that's just because the technology is cheaper, I'm not quite sure, or whether they're hoping that this will be this will be a big thing and get people to buy in, and so they're doing a loss leading thing or whatever. But the fact that all the technology works on the first generation is also incredible when it comes to especially the adapter, which was my biggest worry. I don't notice any difference whatsoever on the focusing at all, and so that's unbelievable to me. So yeah, that's my short review. I have a 20-minute long rant on the camera that I'm probably going to publish tomorrow. So you can. I'm speaking to the audience here. You can listen in and hear. I'll talk about all the different early thoughts of it. I've only had it for a month and a half. I've shot three events and a handful of like just test clips and things like that. So I haven't even begun to really try out all of the different aspects of it, especially in comparison to like the 750 is the other camera that I have. So that's the one I'm going to compare it to. So yeah.
Zach, I'm really surprised you didn't do an unboxing video for us. You've been doing so many unboxings lately.
Oh my god. I actually, the problem is that I got the camera. It was shipped to, I was in LA for a couple weeks, and there was just no place at the place that I was staying at to shoot a video like that. And so I wasn't able to. The box is still out there in LA. I gave, and my the person whose house I was staying at, he loves to throw out. He hates having boxes around. And so I literally told him, I'm like, I swear to God, I will cut you if you throw out the box because not only because I need the box in case whatever when I sell it in a couple years or whatever, but also like I want to be able to. I need to fake an unboxing video.
We should do a reboxing. Like, okay, I'm going to try and stick my camera back in the box and close it up completely.
There'd be a whole new thing that we can do that we could innovate on or thing. Or maybe I'll just get like a cardboard box and have the camera at the bottom. And be like, look at this is what I got. Hey.
Man, look at how they pack their cameras. Come on, Nikon, step up your game.
Yeah, anyway, but yeah, they pack the camera very nicely.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
And this is more... the fact that you told me that you can pull still images off the 4K that look pretty amazing. Yeah, and I can see it. That's obviously incredibly good for you in the sense of photographing something where there's lots of action going on, and or maybe it's a sensitive situation or whatever it is. But I'm kind of wondering about this whole kind of the idea of the value of a photographer of taking that definitive image. If you know what I'm saying.
I agree. And that's a conversation that I think really definitely needs to be had. I mean, for me, it's the biggest useful because I do a lot of interviews and things like that, and or the idea that I'm like taking the decision, and this kind of builds on your thing is like whether or not I'm going to take video of a moment or going to take a still of a moment.
Right.
That's one of the most stressful things that I can do now that happens every time I cover an event. If I'm about to see something and I go, oh my God, what's going to be more saleable? What's going to be more important? What's going to be whatever? Right. And I go, and I have to make that decision. Like, what is going to be the thing that people are going to want to see? For me, it's still because I'm primarily a still photographer. So I will usually go towards still, but like I'm covering a lot of different things that are going to go in a documentary film that I'm working on. And like I covered a protest down in, or wasn't a protest, it was actually a march in Stone Mountain, Georgia. It was a white supremacist rally was supposed to happen, and the anti-fascists basically forced them to, or basically influenced them enough to get them to actually cancel it. And so it was this celebratory kind of march around town, and they burned it basically looked like a piñata that was basically a guy in a Klan outfit, the white robes and everything like that, and they set it on fire. And I'm thinking, the stills of this are going to be stunning, but I'm working on a documentary film. I have to do video because stills only work so well in documentary film. You can, before it kind of irritates the person watching it. Especially when you originally had the capability. It's not like pulling some black and white from ages ago and you can do a Ken Burns thing or make it look, 3D or whatever. But so I decided to take video, even though I'm being so angry because I know this is something that's going to sell if I took stills. But then I realized I'm doing it with the Z6, and I just took a bunch. I have stills from it, and I have video from it because I'm still a still photographer at heart. So the way I frame most of my video is still the way that I would want. I'd want stills to be. So it works out in that way, and also just in general, like portraits and things like that. When you're doing an interview with people, it's nice to be able to take a frame. Not only for later context, but also just to know if you're doing primarily video work, it's good to take a frame, because then you can pull that frame and be like, well, this is what the lighting looked like, this is what everything, and it's the exact same look, which is great, because before, if you took it, it would potentially look different if you took a still in video mode versus a video in video mode. And so that's absolutely amazing for me. I'm so happy, because it was literally between buying this $2,000 4K full video camera and buying the Z6. And literally at the last second, I switched my choice and went with the Z6. And already I'm extraordinarily happy that I decided to go with the actual camera versus the video camera. But yeah.
What was the video camera you were looking at?
It was I think it was a Panasonic model, UX 1000 or something like that. One of those that has a thing. But anyway, that didn't really answer your definitive moment question, which is something that I think that we need to. That is like going to be one of the biggest questions now that every major manufacturer now has a full frame camera that shoots 4K video in different ways, and I believe would have this technology, would have the ability to take high quality frames while you're doing it, and so that's the question. And it's funny, because this isn't a new question. The Rocky Mountain News, back before it went out of business, gave everybody on their staff video cameras back when they shot. I think it was first started shooting 1080, first started shooting HD, and they gave everybody cameras and they just told them, do it. They didn't unfortunately provide any sort of training or any of the kind of necessary things that you need to do to actually have people's video worthwhile. But their idea was 1080p is high quality enough that we can pull the frames for the web or for most photos within print. Obviously not like the bigger ones, but it worked. And that, I remember that happened like 10 years ago, right as I was becoming a still photographer, and being like, that terrified the hell out of me, because I was like, oh God, I guess I need to learn video now.
Well, I mean, the whole thing is when 8K comes around.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously there's some limitations, I guess, shutter speed wise with video, right? Because essentially you can't shoot it at thousandths of a second with video, right?
You can shoot 1,000. You can shoot 8,000 of a second in video. It depends on the amount of available light.
Yeah. You can change.
Oh, okay. So it's essentially the same then, is it? I mean, I don't shoot video, so I don't know that. But I mean, so it's essentially the same. So I don't know. I think that's sort of, there's so many things that technology is sort of downgrade. When it started, I mean, we had to, it was film, so we had to know exposure and things. We had to sort of know so much more than we know right now, right? So
and what's interesting, because right now, I did the perfect example. I was talking about this before, I think before we went on air. So and it's funny because I'm actually talking to the Washington Post. They're potentially doing a story using my photos from Charlottesville. And I mentioned to them, and I was like, oh, by the way, there's a guy, Chuck Modi. He's a journalist, and he took cell phone video of DeAndre Harris being attacked as well. So if you've seen that video, it's likely this guy's Chuck Modi's video. And the young African American kid that was attacked in the parking garage in Charlottesville. That was going to the choice between video and still. I did have a moment where I saw something when I was going into the garage. I knew that something was about to happen, and it's an annoying button switch to do on the Nikon DSLRs to switch from still to video. And a lot of times I screw that up in the moment, because it takes a moment, like there's like two or three beats between switching from one to the other. And a lot of times you've already missed the moment. I mean, the attack that happened to DeAndre Harris was about, I think, like 27 seconds or something like that total. And I probably would have missed half of it, if not potentially all of it, if I hadn't hit the button combination correctly at the right way. And so I decided I'm already in still mode. I'm taking still photos. And I mean, there's a huge difference. My photos of DeAndre Harris being attacked are, was on the top 100 top 100 list. It's a Wall Street Journals, but more importantly, it's been, especially the AP photo that I sold to them, their version of the photo. It has been used probably 5,000 times now in different newspapers around the country. It was on the front page of the Daily News right afterwards. And none of that would have been if I took video.
Yeah.
Like, literally none of that would have happened if I took video. It would be a viral thing, and I don't think that it would ever be used again because of the nature of the way that we consume media. It can be used not only in print, but it can be used in, I suppose they could have pulled out screen grabs or whatever, but we don't see that happening. It's just not a thing that happens. We don't see viral videos. They don't pull, even if it's shot in high quality. Newspapers and publications very rarely, websites very rarely do you see them actually pull the video out or pull a frame of the video out, and so and that's a really good question. And whether
it depends on the nature of the video, and if there was video or photo as a choice.
And so that's the weird thing is that like they. And so it's a really big question, and I think there's going to be a break at some point because the higher and higher quality, even the viral videos that you see of like police beatings and things like that, as the quality increases. I mean, you think going from the Rodney King beating to the quality of video that we have, if you can get the original thing off of somebody's cell phone, it's incredible, and there's no real reason why you can't take a screen grab, but we're not seeing them do it. And so it's interesting whether that's going to be a big change. It's actually a question I think I'm going to have to ask. I'm going to the Northern Shore course in New Jersey next month, and I'm going to try to ask if there's photo editors out there, if there's a legal or technical reason why they don't do it, or whether it's just something. It's like, cause I don't know. You know what
I'm kind of wondering. I was kind of wondering whether or not the act of being a photographer and being so precise, having to be so precise in your image taking, defining what that moment is, or being clear. Because sort of the metaphor of being a writer, you have to basically write with a viewpoint, right? And I think that maybe as a photographer, you also it actually makes a big difference having somebody having to make those decisions and having to commit to something, and to capture it in a way that tells that story and that medium, right? I
think some of it could also be, I mean, this is me like trying to find reason is what I mean. I think a lot of it could also be is that most of the time, if the viral video is not taken by a journalist, it is taken by just a random person, versus the primarily still photos are taken by photojournalists. And they have a instant weight behind them, let's just say. And so like, that's, it's giving, hoping that that's what photo editors are thinking of, is that, this is at least attached to a journalist. It's not attached to some random dude with an iPhone. And maybe that has meaning still. I don't know. Because I've personally been really surprised because I've had a lot of people buy my photos, even though until very recently when I jokingly yelled at the guy who took the video saying, you need to start charging for this video, not only because it's your property and people, but the biggest thing is that people take this more seriously if they're paying for it. They will show it then. If you just give somebody a video, an editor or a producer or whatever, you just give somebody a video, there's a chance they go, whatever. Maybe if we use it, we don't. But if you charge them, especially video, like what video costs, what I charge for video at least, and what I know other people do, they're going to damn well use it. It says the same thing with stills. If they buy 5 stills from me, they're going to use all the stills, because it's ridiculous not to. It's a waste of money if they're going to do it. Yeah. And so it really surprised me that the video and even stills from the screen grabs from the video, because it was just on YouTube or Facebook. I forget what he originally put it on. It didn't go viral. And I think that speaks a lot to what the amount of weight that we put on still photography still, and especially when it's from a photojournalist. So.
Well, I think we're gonna have to cut the show off at this point, but great conversation though. But we are getting to the hour-and-a-half mark, and I do need to end the show. But Liam, you're always welcome to come back on and continue the conversation. We love having you. I love having guests on. But Liam, before we get out of here, can you please tell people where they can find more of your work? or whatever you'd like to direct people towards.
Well, I mean, obviously the website, but Instagram, Liam Robert Sharp is my Instagram handle.
Okay.
I'm having a couple of shows coming up, but they're not in the U.S. Unfortunately, they're in Toronto.
No.
Yeah, I know.
Do you do shows in the U.S.?
I haven't yet, but I'm sure I will do going
someday.
Forward. Yeah, someday. Well, working on that for sure. Yeah,
do you find
sure.
you're getting a good following on Instagram? Do you find it to be a good platform for your work, or are you just doing it because everybody else is doing it?
To be honest with you, I have to. I mean, if Travis was on, Travis would kind of tell me more about that because he's the expert as far as Instagram. But maybe he will follow up and tell me more about it. But no, I I have to use Instagram better for sure. I mean, I don't have any followers. I don't really promote it. I just, I should do, to be honest. So I will talk more to Travis about that.
Indeed.
Because I have to use it as a better platform for sure. So
indeed. Yep. And sad Travis couldn't join us this evening. He's not feeling well, but hopefully he'll be back next week. Well, Liam, thank you so much for being on the show. I truly appreciate it. And just so everybody knows, the way I found and discovered Liam is he actually reached out to me, right? You reached out to me. You contacted us via our show email, which is info@aroundthelens.com. So if you are interested in being part of the show, you can always email me at that email address, or know somebody who wants to get in on the show action. We're always looking for exciting, interesting guests to be on the show. If you were my client, I'd have to charge you to be on the show.
Okay, there you go.
I wouldn't tell you what the price is till afterwards, though. But anyways,
put it on your website.
Indeed. Anyways, Liam, thank you so much for being on the show. Truly appreciate it. Appreciate you coming on, spending some time with us.
Okay, thank you very much.
And for Zach Roberts, I'm David J. Murphy. This has been Around the Lens, episode 161, and we are out. Thanks for tuning into Around the Lens. We hope you enjoyed the show and hope you'll join us next week. In the meantime, go to AroundTheLens.com for show notes from tonight's episode, as well as links to our Patreon, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram pages. We're also always looking for new and exciting guests to feature on each show, so if you know somebody who might be interested, let them know.